If you're packing up boxes right now or you're volunteering to help your friend move into their new apartment, make sure you know all the legal protections you have as a renter. With summer being one of the busiest moving seasons in Philly, we're listening back to our conversation with attorney Catherine Anderson, who represents tenants at Philadelphia Legal Assistance. Make sure you take notes. It's Thursday, July 23rd. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what you need to know as a Philly renter. Catherine, before we get into this whole tenant-landlord relationships, help me to understand Philly's rental landscape. Is Philly a good city for renters, or is it good for landlords? Because rent keeps going up, there's an affordability issue for renters, and yet demand is high to rent in Philly. So there's a lot of competition, and that could be a huge economic win for a landlord.
I think right now it's probably better to be a landlord in Philadelphia than to be a tenant, especially a tenant who's looking for a new place to go. I think you're correct that rents have been going up pretty steadily, and they've really shot up over the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And so I think it's really difficult for tenants to find a place that is affordable. And I think there are a lot of landlords who, they have their pick of who it is that they want to rent to.
Hmm.
And so if tenants have a less than stellar rental history, I think it can be really hard to find a place.
For sure. What makes like a good rental candidate for a landlord? What are they looking for?
Landlords that we see look for people who are leaving their last tenancy, if they have a last tenancy, with a pretty good relationship with their landlord. In the city of Philadelphia, you are not supposed to simply not rent to a tenant because their landlord has filed a court case against them. But there are a lot of landlords who use that as a proxy for, like, was this tenant a good tenant? Did their landlord ever file in court against them for any reason?
Hmm.
Um, I think landlords also, I mean, they're always looking for somebody who has steady income or a cosigner who will help them out.
So I'm a renter. I have a great relationship with my landlord. We communicate well. But I've also had corporate landlords, like those big management companies, which felt less personable. And then I've also had experiences as a renter in Philly with landlords who just didn't want to fix issues with the property, or they made promises to add like this deck that just like never happened. And I've lived all over the city, Catherine. I've lived in West Philly, Logan, Germantown, Shardswood, parts of North Broad Street, Northwest, lived everywhere. Does renting from a management company versus renting from like a couple impact these tenant landlord interactions in Philly?
I think it's a bit of a crapshoot.
Oh
I have
man.
also had I know. So I mean I don't rent now. Now I own, but I have also lived all around the city in many different places, and I've had small landlords and corporate landlords, and I've had some small landlords who were really great, and I've had some corporate landlords who are pretty good. But I think that you can also have somebody who you can have somebody who inherited a house from their mom, and this is the one house that they're renting out. And so they're going to take care of it because they really care about this house that their mother had. Or you can have somebody who inherited a house from their mom and they now live in Tennessee and they don't want to deal with this house other than collecting rent. And so they're going to be a terrible landlord, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's the same with these big kind of corporate owned properties. They tend to definitely have their paperwork in order more.
Hmm.
But sometimes these management companies are very like, this is our job and we have maintenance people on staff and we're going to fix everything very quickly. And sometimes it's, we are cutting corners every place we can and we're not going to make these repairs that you're requesting. So I wish that I could say like go corporate or go small landlord, but I think it's really just like who is the particular landlord at the particular company that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Okay, so people are coming to you with their problems with their landlords. What are some of the biggest issues you hear in these sort of disputes?
So, the work that I do specifically is working with tenants who are entering the eviction diversion program in Philadelphia.
So
So
this
it's
is when
people.
like the relationship pretty much is like strained between the two parties.
Yeah, yeah. The landlords have to go through the eviction diversion program before they file a court case against a tenant in court for eviction. So landlords are bringing their tenants to the eviction diversion program when they're like, there is a thing that I want to evict you for, but we have this 30-day program that helps people try to work it out ahead of time. And honestly, when a landlord is bringing a tenant through this program because they want to try to evict them, there's almost almost always money at the bottom of it, right? The tenant has somehow fallen behind on rent. But we find that there are often other kinds of circumstances behind the tenant falling behind on rent. Most people who are renting want to have a place to live, and so they will pay their rent before they pay anything else. So we see tenants who have health problems that are keeping them from working, and so they can no longer afford their rent. We see a lot of people who get into car accidents, and so they either can no longer transport themselves to work, or they had to spend their rent money getting their car fixed so that they could keep going to work. So we see a lot of like broken down cars causing tenants to fall behind.
Hmm.
And another really big issue that we see are tenants who are struggling with getting repairs from landlords, because a lot of the times tenants will ask for repairs, the repairs won't be done. They go back and forth, they get frustrated, and they start withholding rent. And then the landlord says, well, now you're behind on rent, so I'm taking you through this program and I want to try to get you out. So I think it's kind of like, other stuff that's happening that doesn't really involve the landlord that's getting the tenant behind that may
Hmm.
be understandable and very human. Or it's like the money is really representing some other fight that the tenants and the landlords are already having.
Would you say that the eviction diversion program is working here in Philly?
I think it's definitely working. There was a study that was done on the efficacy of the eviction diversion program, the reinvestment fund. So, the reinvestment fund has conducted a study of the eviction diversion program and found that rates of eviction for people who made agreements in the eviction diversion program were lower. We also know that Philadelphia is one of the only cities that didn't bounce back to its pre COVID eviction rate after COVID moratoriums and other protections were lifted. So the eviction diversion program started in 2020 during COVID, and there's about 4,000 kind of missing eviction filings that just haven't happened per year. And we think that that is mostly because of the eviction diversion program. So I think there are some ways that it's really working pretty significantly.
As a renter, if you get that eviction notice, it could be kind of scary. It's like a threatening thing. Um, what's the course of action? What should be the first step that you take?
So if you get a notice from the eviction diversion program, there's something called a notice of diversion rights. That notice of diversion rights has a hotline number on it that is Philadelphia Legal Assistance's eviction diversion hotline. And you should call that number when you get that notice of diversion rights, because we can kind of figure out what your next steps in the program are and help you use the 30 days that you have in the eviction diversion program to try to figure out some kind of an agreement with your landlord. Tenants will also get a notice that's called a notice to quit, or sometimes a notice of non-renewal of lease. And those letters will be from your landlord or they'll be from your landlord's lawyer. And they'll say something like, you owe me $3,000, pay $3,000 in 10 days or leave. Or they'll say, you owe me $2,000 for that reason. I am not renewing your lease. So you have to be out by such and such date that's in 30 days. The important thing to know when you get those notices is that your landlord can't actually force you out at the end of that period. They still have to take you to court and go through that whole process. But if you get one of those notices, there is a really great Philly tenant hotline. And you can also go to phillytenant.org. If you go to that website, you'll see the hotline, but you also can look up a whole bunch of things. And I think the first thing is honestly to reach out and talk to one of the folks who are answering those hotlines, because they can help you kind of figure out what your rights are in your particular circumstance, what might be the next best steps for you.
All right, these are great resources. So, Catherine, city laws require homes to be livable. Now, for our listeners, help us understand, legally speaking, what does that mean? What makes a place livable versus unlivable?
Yeah, the kind of technical term that we use in the legal field is habitable or habitability.
Hmm.
And habitability in the whole state of Pennsylvania is defined as someplace being safe and sanitary and fit for use as a dwelling. So when you're thinking about safe, you are thinking about, having railings where you should have railings, not having stairs that are falling down, not having pieces of your ceiling that are potentially falling down on you. When you think about sanitary, you think about having water, you think about not having an infestation of insects or of mice. And when you think about fit for use as a dwelling, you're thinking about having heat in the winter. You're thinking about if it's raining outside, you don't want it also to be raining inside. All of your windows have to close, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean minor repairs, right? A running toilet or a dripping faucet or a small leak that your landlord comes and fixes a week after you tell them about it is probably not a habitability issue in that
Hmm.
technical sense, even though they may be very annoying. But we're really thinking about like the big things that are like basic stuff that you need to live in a property.
Okay, now what if you have like a tenant upstairs smoking all the time, or there's like smells in your place? Are those things that make an apartment unlivable?
They can be. Part of it might depend on what your lease says. I don't believe that smoking in your rental unit is generally outlawed in the city of Philadelphia. So if you have a lease that doesn't say anything about smoking, unless you, I don't know, particularly allergic and your landlord can move you or something like that, there's probably not that much that you can do.
Hmm.
Same thing with smells. It probably depends what the smells are from, right? Sometimes people have smells in their apartment because there's actually sewage backing up into their basement. And
Oh
that's a
gosh.
huge habitability issue, right?
Right,
Like that's
right.
really, really big. But if you have I don't know, a neighbor who is like burning incense that you don't like, there's probably not that much you can do about it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what can a Philly renter do if a landlord isn't holding up their end of the bargain here? So, like, let's go back to like the mice and roaches, or if it's, you know, too hot or too cold or not enough, insulation, those sort of things. What can a Philly renter do if their landlord isn't helping out? Are people able to withhold rent or um, break the lease penalty free? What are the options?
There are kind of particular rules about what you are allowed to do and when you're allowed to withhold rent. So the general rule is that if the place is not habitable, right? So if it's not safe or sanitary or fit for use as a dwelling, you as the tenant have the right to first you have to tell the landlord that it is a problem. You have to give
Hmm.
them a chance to fix it. And then you have to tell them again that it's going to be a problem and tell them that you're going to be withholding your rent. And then you can withhold rent proportionally to how uninhabitable or how unlivable the unit is.
Okay, so
And you
you mean basically not withhold the whole 16, 17, $1,800, but maybe like 500 if that's how much it costs to fix the issue.
Yeah, so it's very
Okay.
rare that a tenant actually has the right to withhold the entire amount of rent for
Oh,
you.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and most people don't. And honestly, withholding rent is one of the places that tenants really get themselves into trouble because
Mm,
they do it incorrectly. And then their landlord takes them to court and they think they have a great defense. And then they maybe don't because they didn't inform the landlord the right way about the problem, or they
Wow.
didn't withhold the rent properly in its own separate account, or they withhold too much, right? They withhold the whole amount and they go to court and a judge says, this habitability issue is maybe worth 40% of your rent, so you still owe your landlord such and such amount. So if somebody is going to try to withhold rent, like if your landlord is not fixing something and you want to try to withhold rent, I really think the thing to do is to call that Philly tenant hotline or go online to an organization called TURN, the Tenant Union Rights Network. It's at rturn.net, like the letter R, TURN.net. And they have what are called repairs clinics, where you go and they give a presentation about how to ask your landlord for repairs. And then you have a chance to talk to somebody afterwards who is a lawyer or paralegal about what you can do in your own particular case. So I think if you are a tenant and your landlord is not making repairs, before you start withholding rent, call the Philly Tenant Hotline and talk to somebody about how to do it properly, because it is so tricky and people don't do it correctly. And unfortunately, we are in a situation in terms of the laws and the way they're interpreted, where if you are not like the tenant doing everything right, you can really be in a lot of trouble with your housing, even if the landlord maybe should have been making these repairs all the time.
Interesting. This is really helpful, Catherine. At the same time, though, landlords have rights too. I've lived on the first floor of a multi-family unit, and the tenants above me, they were being kicked out. They left their kitchen faucet running with a sock stuffed in the drain. That caused flooding in my apartment and damaged the property. So, what can a landlord do in a situation like that?
So I'm a tenant advocate. I don't really ever help landlords.
Okay.
So I'm a little like, landlords, figure it out.
Okay.
But there
But that's
are
messed up, right? Because like it's messed up that you messed up the property and it's impacting me as the renter.
just to tenants, please don't do that. You're not
Right.
supposed to do that, tenants. That is, and I don't think that happens that often, but sometimes tenants are very frustrated on their way out. And I think if you are a landlord and that happened to you, there are a bunch of landlord representing attorneys that you can consult with and see if that's, a suit that you want to bring against someone for damages. There are also a couple of landlord oriented organizations in the city. I think the biggest one is called HAPCO, HAPCO, and they have a number. If you go to their website, you can call them and kind of get information and advice about like how to be a landlord and what your landlord rights are. And then the city of Philadelphia also has like a landlord help desk. And I honestly have never called it, so I don't know exactly how to access it. But if you Google like Philadelphia Landlord Help Desk, you will be able to find some resources from the city of Philadelphia. And they also have some people working who can like talk to you specifically about and kind of how you can proceed forward with that. So, tenants don't damage the place on the way out, try to leave it in pretty good shape, because, you're really not supposed to damage things intentionally, and your landlord might have some legal recourse to sue or come after you if you do that. So even if you're like super, super mad at your landlord, just like,
Just
write
don't.
nasty things in your diary about it. You know what I mean? Like, don't damage the property. It's just not a good move. You're putting yourself as a tenant, you're giving yourself more kind of liability legally if you do that.
We've got more about this conversation after the break. Fiddler Club might be Philadelphia's best kept secret. It's a members-only club designed for the way people actually live today, all under one roof. You can start your morning with a workout, take meetings from a co-working space or private office, then end the day with dinner, drinks, bowling, or time with friends. Located right across from 30th Street Station, Fiddler Club brings together fitness, work, dining, and social life in one incredible space. The club features a 2-floor fitness center, indoor pool, golf simulator, cold plunge, co-working spaces, private rooms and offices, 2 bars, a restaurant, private balconies, and even complimentary babysitting for members. So whether you're looking to be healthier, grow your network, get more done, or just have a better place to spend time in the city, Fittler Club gives you a place for all of it. Learn more and apply today at fittlerclub.com. That's fittlerclub.com. All right, Catherine, you've been representing tenants for a long time. Does Philly have enough laws that protect renters from bad landlords compared to maybe some other big cities?
I don't know the whole kind of national set of laws around the country. I have heard that things are much more tenant friendly in New York City. I mostly hear this from tenants who have moved from New York who say things like, a landlord would not be able to do this in New York. Compared to the rest of the state of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia definitely has more protections for tenants. We have protections around landlords who are supposed to have rental licenses and lead safe or lead free certificates. And we also have some laws about what's called retaliation. So a landlord's not supposed to retaliate against you for complaining to a city agency, for instance, license and inspections. If your landlord isn't making repairs to the property, the landlord's not supposed to be able to turn around and evict you for that. And we also have some protections for renters who are looking for a new place. So we do have tenant screening laws. I think I mentioned a little earlier, landlords are not supposed to just have a rule where they don't rent to anybody who's ever had a court case filed against them. So we do have more tenant protections, but I think at the state level, these are kind of like tenant protections piled on top of a state level law called the Landlord Tenant Act of 1955 that is pretty landlord friendly. It gives landlords some really basic things that they're supposed to do, like give due process to a tenant in order to evict them, but it doesn't put a whole lot of responsibility on them. So I think it's still hard to be a tenant legally in Philadelphia.
At the end of last year, a new law went into effect that limits rental application fees to $50 per application. In the past, application fees have been like $70 just for one application, one adult. Has this law made moving more affordable for Philadelphia renters?
Although this law was passed last year, I think it was passed very late last year,
Yeah.
but I really hope so, because you're right. There were a lot of landlords who were charging very high application fees. And it was very difficult for tenants who were applying to a bunch of different places just to be able to afford to apply to the units that they wanted to. I think the law is really interesting in that it caps the application fee at $50 or the actual costs of doing a background check for the application. So if you're actually paying, $30 to your tenant screening company or something, you really should be charging $30 as a landlord. It also is really good in that if you have the same landlord who owns a couple of different properties, and maybe you're applying to units at a couple of different of their properties, they can only charge you that fee one time. Because presumably once they do that background check, if you're good, you're good. If you go back in 2 days because you're also interested in another unit, they shouldn't be able to charge you again. So hopefully it will really cut things down. I think $50 is still a lot. But it does cost something to do screeners.
Well, how much do you think an application fee should be?
I don't think that you should have to pay to apply to an apartment.
Right.
I mean, I think that, there's a trend in landlords where they want to try to shift a lot of their business expenses to tenants and potential tenants. From my perspective as a tenant advocate, those are your landlord business expenses that you have because you have a business. And that doesn't mean that you make your tenants or potential tenants pay for every single fee, right? Maybe it's reflected in the amount of rent that you're charging.
But at the same time, it's your property, right? And you want to make sure that you have renters who are going to pay the rent on time and do like good business with you.
Yeah, and I don't know that the $50 fee is necessarily going to guarantee that that happens.
That's true. That's true. All right, Catherine, let's go over some scenarios. And I'd love for you to like just tell us your opinion on how to like handle this. So, one scenario is, are there any red flags to look out for when you're in that like apartment hunt process?
I think the biggest red flag is if your potential landlord is going around the apartment and telling you the things that they are going to fix before you move in.
Oh yeah, I've had that. I told you, one landlord told me he was going to have this whole big giant deck. It never happened.
Yeah, if they haven't made those repairs while the unit is empty in order to show that unit at its best, they are never going to do that work in that unit while you are living there. They simply will not do it. And with something like a deck, you wanted a deck, you didn't get a deck. It sucks, but
I got a
there are
pile
some
of
people.
trash instead.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a pile of trash instead. There are some people who there will be like holes in the walls, and the landlord will
Hmm.
say, "Oh, I'm going to fix those before you move in." Well, then they pay the security deposit and they're moving in, and they say, "Well, this hole is still here." And then it's a whole fight, because you probably have already moved out of your old place and you can't go back
Hmm.
there. And now you are moving into a place that has a hole in the wall. And when is the landlord going to fix it? So I think if you have a landlord who, like, they're showing this apartment to potential tenants and they don't have it in really good shape, I would not rent that apartment if you have any choice in the matter.
Okay, so if you see something um like a hole in the wall, but you've already signed the lease, are you pretty much stuck in this contract?
It depends a little bit on what the lease says. There are some leases that will talk about what happens if the landlord can't like deliver you a move-in ready unit. And then it's a fight about, whether this hole in the wall makes it move-in ready or not. But that might be one potential way to get out of a lease. So it depends a little bit on what your lease actually says about that kind of situation.
What can you do if you think that a landlord unfairly withholds part or all of your security deposit?
So, the security deposit law for all of Pennsylvania is pretty straightforward about the way you have to request the security deposit. So, when you move out and you are returning the keys to your landlord, you want to make sure that you take a picture, first of all, of every single room before you
Hmm.
go so that you can show that you have left the place empty and that you have left the place relatively clean. We call it broom swept, which just means that you've kind of wipe stuff down and run a vacuum. You don't have to hire a cleaner, so that you can show that you've left things in pretty good shape. After you move out, you send the landlord a forwarding address in something written. So you can send them an email that says something like, "Hey, my new address is blah, 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 blah. Please send me my security deposit." And then your landlord has 30 days to reply by either sending you that full security deposit or sending you a list of the stuff that they said that they had to repair. And, if it didn't use all of the security deposit, sending you the remainder. If your landlord does not respond to you in 30 days at all, you can take your landlord to small claims for that security deposit. And you are allowed under the law to get treble damages. That means 3 times the security deposit back. That's if your landlord does not respond to you at all and you have given them a good forwarding address. If your landlord does respond and you disagree, you can either go back and forth with your landlord a little bit on your own, like, "Hey, these are my pictures. Why are you saying that you had to fix this thing?" Or you can also go to small claims, but you're not going to be able to get 3 times the damages. You would just be able to get the rest of your security deposit back. It's kind of a big fuss for someone to do for, say, $300.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of tenants end up just kind of leaving it, not getting their whole security deposit. Considering the rents have gone up so much, security deposits have also gone up so much. And so if it's an $1,800 security deposit, it might be more worth it for you to go to small claims. You just have to kind of weigh how much time you want to spend in court versus how much money it's been left out.
Hmm. Now, can your landlord enter the property at any time?
Most leases say that a landlord is supposed to give 24 hours notice before they enter the property for routine kinds of repairs and inspections. Your landlord is always allowed to enter your unit if there's like an emergency. So if you are not home and some pipe has exploded under your bathroom that's leaking into the people below you, your landlord is allowed to go in and turn off the water to your unit to keep that leak and that damage from happening. Something like that. If it's not an emergency, your landlord is supposed to give you notice. Like I said, in most leases, it's 24 hours. Some leases have some other amount of time.
What if a landlord isn't fixing issues like leaky faucets or the heating systems?
Yeah, I do think that going to Turn and attending their um, repairs clinic is a really important way to get the information that you need. But just in general, you always want to make repair requests to a landlord in writing so that you have proof that the landlord knew about the problem and when they knew about it. If your landlord is not making repairs, you also have the option to call License and Inspections, which is the city agency that does inspections to make sure that properties are up to code. And with License and Inspection, there is always a possibility that they will shut down your building. They don't do it that often, but it's been very cold. If you have very significant electrical problems that are causing you to not have heat, that's something that Elle and I will sometimes shut your building down for, and then you have to find another place to go.
Now, can a landlord put in the lease, quote, not responsible for repairs? Is that a
I mean,
thing?
they do. Landlords do put that in leases, and I always think that it's kind of funny. It's not funny because tenants take it seriously and they really think that they are responsible for all repairs. But no, there's no such thing as is leasing in the state of Pennsylvania or leasing where the landlord is not responsible for any repairs. A landlord is always responsible for giving you that safe and sanitary unit that is fit for use as a dwelling. And so if he has to make repairs to make that happen, to fix a leaky roof or a leaky pipe or to make sure that the heat is functioning properly, he is responsible for those repairs, no matter what the lease says.
If you're living in government subsidized housing and you're experiencing issues that we've talked about today, is there anything different to be aware of when it comes to the law?
Yeah, so a lot of people who have either housing choice voucher subsidies, which are often called Section 8 vouchers, can also call the Philadelphia Housing Authority to report a landlord who's not making repairs. And the Philadelphia Housing Authority will come out and do their own inspection, and they will send a notice to the landlord and to you that says essentially, this is the stuff that has to be fixed, and this is how long you have to fix it. And they also will assign who has to make what repairs, so they can make a determination of like, oh, tenant, you actually broke this, and so you really should fix it. But like landlord, you have to fix these other things. And so if you have a voucher and you are having trouble with the landlord making repairs, you absolutely should go to PHA. Same thing if you are in other kinds of subsidized housing like PHA-owned properties, you can go to PHA, have them do an inspection, and have them make repairs.
This has all been really helpful, Catherine. Thank you so much. Are there any new laws or regulations that you think Philly needs to be more renter friendly?
One thing that people have been working on at the state level is expungement of landlord-tenant cases, and also not allowing landlord-tenant cases to show up in searches until the case has actually been disposed of. So what I mean by that is if your landlord files against you, in court, municipal court today in the city of Philadelphia. Anybody can go and search your name and see that your landlord is evicting you, whether or not that case is done. And maybe you're going to go to trial and maybe you're going to win that case. But right now, it's this bad look, right? So part of the law that people are asking for at the state level is that people won't show up on background checks or on public dockets until the case is actually done and we know who won, so that tenants don't have their reputation go down if they're looking for other places to live. And the other part of that is expungement, which is if you have had a good outcome or the case is withdrawn against you, or it's been a certain number of years since the case was decided against you as a tenant, you can have that kind of wiped, just like you would have certain criminal records wiped and people wouldn't be able to find it anymore. So those are some laws that people are working on at the state level. Tenant advocates have, I think, repeatedly been bringing to Harrisburg for several years. And every year it seems like we get close, but not quite to passing. So I think those would be some really great laws for tenants across the state.
All right. Catherine Anderson, thank you so much for all of this helpful information and for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been great.
Before you leave, I have a favor to ask you. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. We want to learn more about you, our listeners, so that we can better serve the city and serve the people in it. Please take the survey at citycast.fm/survey. It's only 7 minutes long. That's citycast.fm/survey. Plus, survey takers will be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some CityCast Philly swag. That's citycast.fm/survey. And even if you took it last year, we would really be grateful if you took it again, since we can't use last year's data anymore. That's all for us today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode, learning more about renters' rights in the city, share this with a friend. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Philly. All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with the Friday News Roundup. Talk to you then. Bye.